Okay, so most of you, you're starting to get back the feedback on the midterm projects. You should have almost all those graded this week. Most got through a big chunk of them. I just haven't got them all quite there. A lot of the feedback you're going to see in there is prepping you for the final part, which is two main additions to the midterm projects, which is one, making sure you have logging, which we already covered back in the debug module, and then two, making sure you have object-oriented programming. And so object-oriented programming, there's a couple key pieces with that. That's what we'll cover here today. So object-oriented programming, or OOP, is really just a change in the way that you deal with, say, even your objects or your, not your objects, but your dictionaries or your lists, if you're keeping track of information about one particular thing, all right? So if we look at some of these examples, say we have a employee object, all right? And that employee object, we're going to store information about them, such as their name and their age. And you guys are probably already gathering this kind of information in your project, depending on what it is. So what you do is you create this class of employee, and you have this initial function that's def, two underscores, init, underscore, underscore, and then self, name, and age. And what that means is when we start this particular object, we need to take in name and age. All right, so we'd have to pass it to it. Then we set that to self. So anything that's inside of a object like this will have this self precursor. So self.name equals the name that we gave it. Self.age is the age that we gave it. And then to create objects of this employee, you would call something like this. So say we have this list, right, where Kirk has the first name, the age, the name of that person, and maybe their rank, something like that, if I remember right, the year they started working, right? We could store that information in this object by passing certain things back up to it. The beauty of that is instead of having this list where you have to know the order, or a dictionary where you have to know the key and the value type that you give it, when you have an object, all that information is stored and contained within that particular user. So you can set up this type, you know what I mean? You set up this container of I want a employee, and then you list all the things that employee would have. When you create that object, you can store that information. So a lot of you in your midterm projects, for example, if you're doing a text adventure game, you're going to have more than likely a player object, right? So you create this player object, it stores their name, it stores any high scores. If they have an inventory system, like a list where they have to go through and find a key and a sword or whatever else, you can store that as part of the object, right? The beauty of that is if they replay your game, they already have their objects or you already have their name. You can keep calling things associated with that. We'll go into more detail as to what that means. So this will give you some more examples of how this works. So here's like a dog, and under that dog, we have a variable called species, and we give them the Latin name for dog. And then when we initialize this particular instance, we again pass a name and an age, and therefore we could start the instance of a dog like this. Now, because this requires name and age, we would have to call it something like this. So we have Miles as our object, then we create an instance of dog, and we pass it the name of the dog and the age of the dog, and now we have that dog object. The beauty of that dog object is we could just call whatever we called it .name, and it returns it back. If we call whatever that object is .age, we get that value back. Inside, if we have variables like that species, we can always just call .species, and it gives that variable back to us and all the results. You could change that by saying something like miles.species equals this, and it will go ahead and update that particular one. All right. Other nice things about that is being able to set a defined description. So right now you probably have a bunch of different functions to print certain things out. You can actually store that within the object itself. And so now all you have to do is call that object.description, and it will print it out in the format you want. It already has access to those variables because it's just self.name and self.age, which is part of this object. So you don't have to write a new one for every single one you do. This keeps it all contained and makes it a lot easier and cleaner in your code. Down here, you could again have another print. And so you could use F statements like we're doing here, where you could use your squiggly brackets, put in the variable name, and it will go ahead and dump it into this string coming out. So you could have something like Miles, you create this instance of the dog, You do miles.description, and it's formatted so that it puts the name and the age to say Miles is 4 years old. You tell it to speak, and Miles says woof woof. You say bow wow, and it says bow wow. Right? This speak is you passing in a quote sound, and that's just a string that we're dumping in there. So if we passed in woof woof, it will dump it into this. If we passed in bow wow, it would pass it in there as well. There again, if we had a series of names like Miles, Buddy, and Jack, we could print those names and we get that out. If we print a Miles, aka if we just print an object, you're going to get something like this object tag back. All right. There's no default for you to be able to print that back. If you want to create a default, you create what's called an underscore underscore string underscore underscore, and this will be the default that would get printed back to the user. All right. So if I said just print Miles, now it will actually go ahead and print whatever you set this string as a default. So if you have a lot of, if you think back to the Ford project and we created the dictionary of a car, right? And they all had the same information. We would create an object of a car with that same style information, and then you would feed it that information and you could call back from those objects. Again, the nicety is that you already have functions to be able to print out them in a nice order. You could print longer descriptions. You could do a lot more things with the object-oriented side. For most in here, again, it's usually going to be a player object, and you're going to see that next week when we convert a midterm project to a final project. But most of you, it's going to be some kind of player object in there. I've seen a lot of hangman or guess the letter games or things like that. If you're looking for the need for words, you're going to use something like the random word module. So random word Python, and that is this one here. And so this, you would pip install a random word, then you could go ahead and import it into your project and use r.randomwords, and then from there, r.getRandomWord, and it feeds you back a word. So you don't have to come up with words for your hangman game. Now, there's much more nuances to this. You could tell it specifically, you know, I want 4-character words or any of that kind of stuff. You can get much more detailed as to where you can use this get random word. So if you look in the services, you can see how you can test that out. For your final project, you can either build these objects out like this, or you can use a third-party module like random word. All right. So if your project needs to do anything where we pip install something and it's not something we covered in this class, so not like requests or beautiful soup or any of those that we covered. If it's something we didn't cover in this class and you pip install it in order to use it in your project, that counts for your object-oriented piece, because essentially that package you're installing is an object, and then you're calling different functions from that object. All right. Which means you're going to have to read the install guide and see how to actually use it, which is the same as you learning how to write your own OOP. It works both ways. All right. Does anybody have any questions on OOP for that piece as to what you really need to know for the final? Okay. Out here, again, it's going to run you through these examples. I encourage you to go through this website, this Python-oriented programming 3. Run through some of these examples so you understand. It does go into more detail here where you can have a child and parent class. So for example, if we have a parent and their hair color is brown, we create a child class that inherits everything from their parent. It would go ahead and inherit that hair color from that. All right. This gets way more complicated than what you need for the final project. So I'm not going to go into super great detail in there. But you can definitely walk through here if you're planning on doing that for your project. Right. Now, back in our content, old videos, this is a really good video from back here in the fall. All right. It's going to, again, walk you through everything you need to know about OOP. This one here is also going to do the same, and it will also have some recommendations on how to do your final project in there as well. So instead of reinventing the wheel, those are great ones to fast forward, get to the part you need, watch it over, back it up, that kind of stuff. All right. I will post today's video so you can see a little bit of what we did in here. And I could code some of these examples, but they're honestly coded right in those examples here. Okay. Does anybody have something in their project in here that they were trying to convert over? Probably not yet. If you have dictionaries, it's really easy to convert your dictionary stuff over to OOP. If you read that first little part or watch the video, That's exactly what I do. Is I take somebody's midterm project and we convert them over to from dictionaries over to objects. It's real simple to make that up. Same way with lists, like we showed in there, you can convert lists over to objects as well to store that information. Again, if you guys did the text adventure style, where you probably need some inventory because they got to have a key in their inventory to get to the next stage or whatever, just take that same code and move it up under the player object so that they can check and find out whether or not that player object is accessible. Okay. The alternative to that is you can install third-party modules and use those. So if you had a midterm project that like in the past, I've seen people work with Spotify, right? So they import the Spotify module so they can communicate with their playlist, and it helps them build a playlist from their Python project. That's obviously an option as well. Those are the reason I allow that is because you have to go read the documentation in order to make those work, and you're doing the same level of work as writing your own. That's what Python is. Most of Python is using somebody else's modules. You still have to write your own in order to make your program work, but most of the time you need to learn how to read those documentation. And that's something like what you see here in Random Word. You would come out here to read documentation, click on homepage. That will take you out to usually a GitHub or somebody else that has information there. And if you scroll down, you'll get some information on that. If you want to check out the services or where you want to pull stuff from, you could come out here to like WordNick, and it would show you how to get those random words. So you could import random word, import the word nick, and then tell it I want a random word, or maybe a list of words, or maybe even the word of the day. And it will again tell you how to make use of those particular ones. Like here, if you wanted to use this one where it has a dictionary definition, it's part of a speech like a noun or a verb, the minimum that you want, the maximum you want, and the total dictionary count, and it would return that back to you. So you want a maximum or minimum length of 5 characters, max length of 10, you could return all that kind of stuff back. So you can get real detailed as to the type of words that comes in. So if you have a specific one where you wanted to get random words like this, then it would return something back like these words. What if you wanted those to be more words that people actually know, then you can fine tune that down inside this string of different things you could pass in. All right, as far as the final, this is a big chunk of your points is the OOP and your logging. So we'll cover again more of the final stuff next week, but just so you guys understand that OOP is important for your points. It's the last 20 points of your project. All right. This part up here is essentially everything you did in the midterm. It's just now worth 60 points of your final. You're going to add logging, which you just watched the debug video, right? It tells you exactly how to get your 20 points for logging. Then for this OOP, I tell you, you can either use third-party modules. You do have to tell me how to pip install everything, right? And the video during next week will show you exactly how to do that. Or you can create your own classes. So again, it's worth 5th of your grade. So make sure you understand how to enter that in. If you have troubles or can't understand how to get the OOP for your specific project, let me know and we can go through it. I'm giving you suggestions on every single one of your feedbacks or on your midterm projects. So in the feedback notes, it will tell you, you should probably use this for the OOP requirement. And then I give you an example of what to do inside there. All right. So you're not out in the wind trying to figure out how to do it. I on every single one of those midterms, I give you that feedback. That's why it takes me forever to get through. All right. Anybody in here online have any questions? Like I said, definitely go back, watch those videos if you need more beyond what this text is here. Watch those videos I recorded here because they're do a really good job of pointing that out and how to use it. Students seem to really like the videos. They like to be able to record and fast forward, go back and forth. Have you guys used the videos quite a bit? Okay, good. All right, I'll stop the recording.